Welcome to the Parliament of Western Australia. In this program, we will focus on the frequently asked questions, the questions that are continually asked by people who visit the Parliament here, and there are thousands of them every year. And one of the questions that's asked quite often is, how many people work here? And I always answer to that, about half. But don't repeat that, you might get me into trouble. When visitors enter the Parliament of Western Australia, the first thing they will see is the black swan, the symbol of Western Australia. And this swan is made from the beautiful timbers of Western Australia. And three of those trees have Aboriginal names, Jarrah, Marri and Wandoo. And the swan here represents the first industry. When the British and the Irish first arrived in 1829, timber was the way they made their money. Another industry represented here is the pearling industry, started by the Japanese, Chinese, Malay and Aboriginal pearl divers up the north of Western Australia. And at one time, it was the biggest pearling industry in the world. And the tail feathers and the bit on the beak here is made from mother of pearl. The beak is banded ironstone, the eye is the semi-precious stone agate, and the centre of the eye is iron ore, representing the mining industry, because obviously it's not timber and pearls that's making the money today, but resources like iron ore, the basic thing you need to make steel. One of the most frequently asked questions is, how much is this chandelier worth? Well, I don't know how much it's worth, but I do know it came to Western Australia in the 1850s from London, and it was in a house just down there where the freeway is today. The houses there were knocked down in the 1960s, but the house it was in belonged to the Auditor General of Western Australia, the first Auditor General, William Knight. And when the house was knocked down, it was brought here to this part of the Parliament when this part of the Parliament was added on in the 1960s. Another frequently asked question is, are the doors of the lift made of gold? No, they're not. They're bronze. If they were made of gold, they would have been sold by the Treasurer by now. No, not really. Or maybe they might have been. Many people want to know why the lion and the unicorn are in the West Australian Parliament. Well, the lion represents England and the unicorn represents Scotland. And they were a gift from the Westminster Parliament to this Parliament about 80 years ago. And for many years they were on the outside of the building, but they were brought in here to save them from falling apart any further. This horn here fell off many years ago, but it's been restored now. The horn's back on it, so here he is. A lot of school children love the unicorn. It's one of the delights when they walk up the stairs and they see this unicorn, they love it. But it represents Scotland. This is the bust of the first Premier of Western Australia, Sir John Forrest. And I often ask the school children, do you know anything that's named after him? And there was one school group here from Bunbury. And I said, do you know of a hotel in Bunbury that's named after John Forrest? The answer from one of the school kids from Bunbury? The Highway Hotel. No, not. The Lord Forrest Hotel, of course. A lot of people want to know who these people are. Why are they here? Well, they are the first Legislative Council from 1832, with the Governor, James Stirling, and other settlers who came here with Captain Stirling in 1829. Who are they? Well, Peter Broun. We'd call him the Treasurer today. Now, his grant of land he called Bassendean, which is now the Perth suburb of Bassendean, but that was his farm. He owned all that. The man here, William Mackey, he was an Irishman from Ulster, and he was a judge and a lawyer, and his land is basically Caversham in the Swan Valley. Now, these two are cousins, and he had a lot of land in the Swan Valley as well. This is Frederick Irwin. There's a big school in Mandurah called Frederick Irwin named after him, and he was in charge of the 63rd Regiment of Foot, in charge of His Majesty's land forces. This man here, John Septimus Roe, he was the Surveyor General. His job was to divide up all the land, because that's what they were here for. They wanted as much land as possible. And his country home, if you like, was Sandalford Winery in the Swan Valley, and he had a lot of land there. He's got a few things named after him, 2 schools, John Septimus Roe, 2 of them, and also the Roe Highway named after him. And of course, Governor Stirling, the Viceroy, the King's representative, and he had a lot of land given to him in the Swan Valley and Harvey and Beverley, and so he's the King's representative, and there was no one above him except for the King, and the King was in England, so he was thought of as almost like an absolute ruler here in Western Australia, in the colony in the early days. And the man in the corner here is Commander Mark Curry. He was the clerk. His job was to record it all and write down what they were saying in this Legislative Council. And his grant of land is what is now the University of Western Australia and Shenton Park. A lot of land, that's what they were here for. One of the questions asked here is, are there any rules that the members must learn? And there are, and these are the rules. The standing orders, the rules of what you can and can't do here in the Parliament, and every member must learn the standing orders. This is the Legislative Assembly of the Parliament of Western Australia. It's here that the laws of Western Australia are made, in the lower house at least. It's modelled on the House of Commons in London, so it's the voice of the common people, and it is here that the government is formed. By that I mean whoever wins control here becomes the government. Put it this way, if you don't win here, forget it, you will never be government. So as you can see, there's no one here at the moment except for me and you. A lot of people seem to think that members of Parliament should be here all the time. Well, if they're not here, it doesn't mean they're not working. It means they're probably in a meeting somewhere in the building, or maybe in their electorate office or their ministerial office, because a parliamentary day is very long. Today is a sitting day, and the members are already here in the building. They are here from about 9 o'clock, and they'll meet in here at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And the sitting today could go through to as late as midnight. The right wing is the government. The left wing is the opposition. And here the Premier sits. Right here is the Deputy Premier and ministers. Here, 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 here. All these ones are the proverbial front bench. There's too many of them to sit in the front bench, so they are all around the Premier basically. And the back benches are the ones who are not ministers. But on this side over here, opposite the Premier, is the opposition, and their leader sits there, the leader of the opposition, directly opposite the Premier. The opposition, the ones who basically lost the election. But their job is to hold the government to account. They are members of Parliament, continually asking questions why, because they are the alternative government. If the Premier was standing with his arm outstretched with a sword in it, and the Leader of the Opposition was standing with his arm outstretched with a sword in it, the swords can't touch. That's another tradition from the Westminster system. This is the mace, the symbol of the authority of the Speaker. And that tradition goes right back to the early Westminster Parliaments, when several speakers were attacked and murdered, and 7 speakers, I believe, were actually executed on the orders of the King. Now it is a symbol of their authority. In the early days, the mace was a big, ugly weapon with spikes and whatever on it. Now it is a beautiful gold symbol. It is the symbol of their authority. And the mace sits here. This is the seat of the Speaker. The Speaker is like the chairman, the umpire, the referee, and he or she is in charge of order and control in the House. But to become Speaker, you must first become elected, like anyone else at the election. So first you're elected, then the other members of the House choose this person to be the chairman, the umpire, the referee. But the term the Speaker comes from the early traditions, from the early Westminster Parliaments in London, from around the year 1300, when the Speaker was the Member of Parliament who had the permission of the Parliament to speak to the King on behalf of the Parliament. And right above us is the coat of arms of the Sovereign, with a lion representing England, the unicorn representing Scotland, and in the centre, the shield of the Knights of the Garter, the highest knights of chivalry in England. And of course, it's all in French. Now, why would the motto and the coat of arms of the British Sovereign still be in French? The wording is French because the Order of the Garter Knights was formed in 1348, when the nobles of England were the descendants of the Norman invaders of 1066, and French was the dominant language of the English court. The wording around the shield is "Honi soit qui mal y pense," which means evil to him who evil thinks, and is the motto of the Knights of the Garter. At the base of the coat of arms is the motto of the Sovereign, Dieu est mon droit, meaning God and my right, signifying the divine right of British sovereigns. Another frequently asked question is, what are these chairs for and who sits here? Well, these are the clerks, the clerk, the deputy clerk and the assistant clerk. They are the principal advisors to the Speaker. They're not members of Parliament. They may be lawyers, but they certainly have an enormous understanding of the procedure of Parliament, and they help the Speaker. That's what their job is. This is the chair of the Sergeant-at-Arms, who carries the mace, the symbol of protection of the Speaker, and they symbolically protect the Speaker's authority. And they also have the power of arrest over anyone in the building. So if someone really does something bad, the Sergeant-at-Arms would be the person who deals with them. Now, one of the questions that's asked here is, do the members have to attend? Well, yes, they do. They roughly represent about 25,000 people, 25,000 electors, that is, and their name is recorded in the attendance book. So the Sergeant-at-Arms also takes the attendance. We'll tick your name, just like that. See those? Those are many years of parliaments here. Many people ask, what's this table for? And of course, in the federal parliament, the Prime Minister would be here and the Leader of the Opposition here. But in this chamber, it's too small. So the Premier speaks from his or her seat here and the Leader of the Opposition from his or her chair there. So what is this table for? It's for when the ministers go into what's called consideration in detail. Now, that is pretty well self-explanatory. You consider a bill in detail. And the minister, say it's the health minister, and they're talking about a new hospital or something like that. Let's call it the new hospital bill of whatever year it is. And so the health minister might sit there, but in this consideration in detail, they're brought here. And they bring with them 3 advisors, 3 experts who sit here, and they've got to know all the detail. The minister can't be expected to know everything, they just can't. But these people are expected to know everything. And people, the members here, can ask questions through the minister of these people, and they've got to know the answers. That's what this table's for. This is the Legislative Council, the upper house. And it is where a bill is finally dealt with before it becomes a law. If it passes here, it goes to the governor, who signs it into law. It is called royal assent. And this is the black rod, the symbol of this house. It is the symbol of the sovereign in the absence of the sovereign. The Queen can't be here, so in her absence, the black rod is the symbol of her authority. And this black rod dates from 1954 to mark the arrival of Queen Elizabeth II as the first reigning sovereign to step onto Australian soil. And the black rod sits here. This is the crest of the Western Australian Legislative Council, and it has been the crest since 1832. It incorporates the coat of arms of the Sovereign and the Black Swan of Western Australia, and the shield of the Knights of the Garter. But this is the coat of arms of King William IV, who was king at the time when the Western Australian Legislative Council began in 1832. This is the seat of the President of the Legislative Council, who is like the chairman, the umpire, the referee. And people often ask, what's an upper house for? What does the Legislative Council do? Well, collectively, they are known as the House of Review. They check everything. They go into detail. Now, everyone here is elected, but they're elected to be the final place where most proposed laws come to be checked and checked and checked before they become a law. So they were some of the questions frequently asked at the Western Australian Parliament. In the following episodes, we will look at the history of this beautiful building and many more aspects of what happens here in your Parliament.